Hi, I'm Sandy Kreisenbeck, nurse practitioner at Optimal Health Spectrum, Dr. Mielke's clinic, and Dr. Daniel Rossignol Medical Center, both of them in Pleasanton, California. I'm honored to be here before both forward-thinking clinicians and parents and alike to talk about hope for our children and my experiences as a parent and as a nurse practitioner. It is my intention today that my story about my experience as a parent and as a clinician will hopefully instill hope that your child can improve and can recover. I'll start with talking about what is autism. And as most of you know in the room, autism, social interaction, reciprocity, I can't say that. Reciprocity, how do I say that? Reciprocity, you're going to edit this out, right? Reciprocity. Okay, so what is autism? As many of you know, it can affect social interaction and reciprocity. I can't say that word. I'm just going to stop. Okay, I'll start off by saying I'll start off by talking about what is autism. Well, autism affects social interaction, expressive and receptive language, and rigid and repetitive behaviors. According to this CDC, 1 in 59 children of 8 years of age have autism. According to the NCHS report in December of 2016, 1 in 36 children have autism. 1 in every 38 boys has autism, and approximately 1 in every 152 girls have autism. I'll also start off by talking about feelings. So as a parent, I can connect with this greatly. I remember when my middle child was diagnosed with autism, I felt like it was an uphill battle. And to the right of this slide, I'm sure a lot of you feel that way. It's not uncommon to feel overwhelmed, anxious, sad, hopeless, scared, a sense of grief and loneliness. I felt like my child was drowning in the deep water and I couldn't save him. Also, separation from family and friends is often, I often hear that from my patients. They have a loss of family and they have a loss of friends. I have patients' parents that often tell me that their child's doctor made them feel like they were quote unquote stupid or crazy. And I tell you these things because this talk is I want to provide hope for you. And so I want to first start out by saying validate these feelings because I think that's important. And the next thing I want to say is that you are not alone. It takes a village. My sons, I have 2 kids on the spectrum, one of which is recovered, one of which is moving along. It took a village for us. We have several doctors, several therapists, school professionals that have helped us along the way. It's a journey. A little bit about myself. 13 years ago, my middle child was diagnosed with autism. And 11 years ago, my youngest child was diagnosed with autism. 2 very different stories. I'll kind of tell you a little bit throughout the way of this talk. And I think that's important to say in the beginning is that all children are very different. And we can't treat any child the same. We were my husband was in the military. We were living in the Central Valley, so our environmental exposure, with regards to our environmental exposure, right next door to our home, they were crop dusting. We lived next door to a farm. The air was thick from pesticides, and the water did not taste good. So I'm sure it had some kind of pollutants in it. We moved to Pleasanton after my husband got out of the military, and that was in 2007, so that Dr. Lynn Mielke could treat my middle child, and I could work as an IV nurse. And again, like I said at the bottom here, my children have 2 different stories with common denominators, and I want to emphasize that as we go throughout the talk. In the beginning, behaviors. I'm sure many of you will connect with this. In the upper left-hand corner of the slide, you see my son and my daughter watching TV. And we thought that my son was deaf because he would not turn around to his name. So we were of the forethought that we were going to have to learn sign language, and that he was hearing impaired, and we were not thinking of autism. In the early days, as you can see in the right-hand corner, lots of crying, lots of tantruming. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see several knives. We couldn't even turn our back for a second. I was changing my youngest son's diaper when this happened, and so this was a fear that we had every day of just turning our back for 1 second and something like this happening. In the lower right-hand corner, I'm sure a lot of you can identify with this, is he was stimming off of a belt. He liked to carry things around. I often hear that from my patients' parents, that their child carries something around and then they stim off of it and they look at it in front of their face. So that was, if we didn't know where that belt was or misplaced it, it was the end of the world. I remember in the beginning therapies, and so I think it's important to stress that, I'm talking about my biomedical treatment heavily in this talk today. It's near and dear to my heart. I was inspired to be a nurse practitioner because I've seen so many children get better, including my own. But I think that it's important to also think that, to know that we should be thinking about other therapies that help our kids. Because often I see people that just do biomedical treatment and they drop all their therapies. So speech therapy, occupational therapy, ABA therapy, physical therapy. In the beginning, when we first started off, I asked my son's pediatrician for a speech consult. He was 16 months old. He wasn't talking. All he could say was, "Here you go." And the pediatrician said, "Oh, he's a boy. It's okay that he's not talking." And I said, "No, I want a speech consult." So as many of you know, it's several months to wait to get to see a clinician that evaluates our child. And so I waited 2.5 months to get him evaluated by a speech therapist. At which time she said to me, Have you ever thought that maybe he has autistic-like tendencies or sensory integration disorder?" And here I was just thinking that he was hearing impaired and needed tubes because he was always sick. And so pointed out to me, he doesn't have any joint attention, which means looking at you, looking back at the object, looking at you again. He doesn't point, and so that was really a shock to me. So she recommended speech therapy a couple days a week and referred us to the regional center. Then when we went to the regional center, 3 days after my youngest son was born, my middle child was diagnosed with autism. At which time it was recommended that he have a full 40-hour program, because that was a study that came out that said that children that had 40-hour programs of ABA did a lot better. And so we had somebody coming to our house every day. He had a full program in that. He was also going to school. He also had occupational therapy and physical therapy. So a lot of you can identify with occupational therapy because occupational helps with not only fine motor control and activities of daily living, but it also helps with sensory issues, whether it be hyposensory issues or hypersensory issues. And so things like when kids are really sensitive to sound, they're hypersensitive to the sound. If they are shudder when you touch them, they're hyposensitive. So it teaches you, occupational therapists teach you or give you something called a sensory diet, where you help to do things that can help regulate their system, whether it be joint compressions or a weighted vest or a swing. And I remember thinking as a parent, like, gosh, this is over the top. This is like way too much that I have to do joint compressions 6 times a day and wear this weighted vest and take it on and off and swing him multiple times a day. And I say all these things because I want to identify with you in this room as parents that this is common. This is the stuff that and it's good that we go through, I should say, and it's good to know that this is a journey that other people take and that it does help children get better. So I think that's important. School. As many of you know, it is very challenging to get the services that we need from school. And we need, as far as IEPs, fighting for services. I won't talk a lot about that, but I will say that this is an integral part of their therapy along the way. Biomedical treatment. So again, near and dear to my heart. It's a multi-system approach to help rule out the cause for and treat autistic symptoms. GI, food sensitivities, allergies, nutrition and diet, immune autoimmunity, environmental allergies, neurological and seizures, environmental exposure, i.e. chemicals, pesticides, mold, metal exposure and toxicity. And like I said before, this isn't to just take the place of ABA, speech, occupational, physical therapy at school. So we'll start with diet. I hear this all the time. I'm sure many of you in this room connect with this. He only wants to eat goldfish crackers and drink milk for every meal. And if he doesn't drink milk in a timely fashion, he acts like he is going through a withdrawal. So leaky gut, I mean, this is a common hot term right now. Leaky gut occurs when there's inflammation in the gut, and there can be inflammation in the gut secondary to quote-unquote gut bugs. And if there's inflammation in the gut, the junctions of the gut that are supposed to be very tight can become loose and boggy. And when they're loose and boggy, food can leak out of the system, circulate around in the bloodstream, and then we're all of a sudden sensitive to the foods that we put in our mouth. The thing that's unique about foods that are containing gluten or casein is that they metamorph into a glutamorphin or a caseinmorphin. And glutamorphin and a caseinmorphin are similar to morphine-like properties. So a lot of us talk about that their child has high pain tolerance. Well, this is why. A lot of us talk about, well, if they don't get their milk drink in a timely fashion, or their goldfish crackers, they're throwing a fit. Well, it's like they're going through withdrawal like somebody would that takes morphine or uses morphine. In my own experience, I had my son fell in McDonald's when he was about maybe 22 months old. He fell back in a booth, hit his head. The whole entire McDonald's, everybody in the whole entire McDonald's restaurant came up to my husband and said, "Is he okay?" Because you could hear how loud his head hit the floor, and he didn't even feel it. IgE and IgG allergies. I talked to you about IgG allergies, which are food sensitivities that occur from when foods leak out of the gut. Also IgE allergies. I'll talk to you more about that when I get to the immune section. But the point that I'm trying to make here is when you remove foods that you're sensitive to, kids, a lot of them have clarity. A lot of them have better focus, better mood. They're not constipated. They don't have diarrhea. They sleep better. They eat better. So the theme, like I said, is hope for our children, and this is one thing that can help children do a lot better. The other thing that I remember, and I want to validate, and I think it's important as a parent to validate what you're going through, and so you can be motivated to move forward and on. Is that it's very overwhelming, these diets. I've done every diet. The organizer of this conference, Pramila, my dear friend from over 10 years ago, writing her, how do I do this diet? How do I do this? Can I eat this? Can I eat that? So as you can see, there's several diets up here, and I just want to validate that they can be overwhelming, but they can help our children. The other thing that is important to stress is that we all think that we're doing the perfect right things, and that some things that are good for our children can also, our children can react to. So, for example, something like bone broth. Well, bone broth, the marrow that comes out from the bone provides a gelatinous, acts as a gelatinous nature against the intestine. And so that is very good in healing for leaky gut, but it is high in glutamate, and so which is a neurotransmitter, and kids with autism often have high glutamate, which can cause excitability and hyperactivity, maybe even seizures. So fermented vegetables, they're high in histamine. We give fermented vegetables because we want to repopulate the gut with good flora. But I want to, again, I stressed in the beginning, not every child is the same. But I also want to tell you, so for one child, if fermented vegetables worked, the other child might not. It might not work because of the histamine response. The other thing that is I feel like you would identify with is feeling left out when you're at functions. Like when you're at a birthday party and the kid next to next to your own child is eating blue cake and thriving, and your kid is eating carrots and has diarrhea and isn't talking. So I tell you all these things because it's important to know. It feels good to know, like, okay, you had that happen to you too, and look where you moved forward ahead and you had improvement. So that's important. Nutrition wise, so I'm going to go through these pretty fast because I don't have a lot of time. Kids on the spectrum are very picky eaters, a lot of them, and so that's when because they're picky eaters, they can have nutritional deficiencies. They can also have nutritional deficiencies, i.e. from malabsorption from gut bugs. So when your child is low in markers, vitamins and minerals, and you give them vitamins and minerals, or you treat the source of why they have nutritional deficiency, they do well. Any child would do well, or any adult would do well if you did that. So that's like 101. The next thing I did talk to you about, IgG, food sensitivities, leaky gut. On the right-hand side, there's a couple stars that show that the child is sensitive to food. One thing that this report doesn't show is if you have immune deficiency, you're not going to test positive for this. If you don't eat the food, you're not going to test positive for this. But if you see things like a 3-star, at the bottom is brewer's yeast. That could be in bread. So even if you're eating gluten-free bread, your child might react to that. You want to remove foods that are started in 3s and 2s. Immunoglobulin, to the left-hand side of the page are IgE. Those are true allergies. I have people come in all the time and say, oh, my kid is allergic to this. And it's like, no, he or she has a food sensitivity. They're different. Food sensitivities are a delayed reaction to foods up to 48 hours later that it can affect your child, and like I said, in all different ways. Whereas IgE allergies, where you eat the food and your throat closes up and you can't breathe and you get hives. So they're different. But IgE is an immune response, and when you know that your child is allergic to certain foods, they do better. GI, Dr. Kriegsman is going to be talking a lot about GI today, so I'll skip over that. But you can see, this is my own son here. He's posturing against a desk, so meaning he's leaning against a desk because he's painful. This is my youngest child. You can also see the little scar on the right-hand side of his belly. That is because he had an ulcer and he had to have an operation to address that. Stool test. So this is highly talked about. You hear gut-brain connection. 80% of the immune system is in the gut. In the left-hand side of the corner is a low beneficial flora. Flora, the good flora and good bacteria. And you see NG, Bifidobacterium. That's one of the low beneficial floras that's one of the beneficial floras that is low. Why is that important? Well, I always tell people I want the good guys to win the war. So I want the good guys to crowd out the bad guys. And so bad bacteria and candida or yeast overgrowth and parasites can cause behaviors. So, and when you treat those, kids do get better. How do they get better? They get better focus, they sleep better, their bowels get better, they're not as aggressive. So, and in my own children, I saw that. You look in the lower left-hand corner, there's under normal flora, there's a bad bacteria, and I'll show you a couple slides forward about how to treat that. You look at the bottom left-hand corner, there's yeast overgrowth, many yeast. I talked about how when you treat that, children get better. Elastase, that's just how well he's digesting his food, or his exocrine pancreatic function is not where it should be, so we would give digestive enzymes to help with digesting your food. All the way down, in this whole box in the upper part of, or the upper top box, is looking at how well you digest food as far as fat, or how well a child digests food, whether it be fat or vegetable fibers. And a lot of children have undigested food in their stool. When they have undigested food in their stool, I mean, they have issues. They have a lot of issues as far as malabsorption and leaky gut, and they're just not getting the vitamins and minerals that they need. Inflammatory markers. When kids have inflammation, that's in the middle box. We talked about that. That can cause malabsorption. So I'll skip over that because Dr. Kritzman will talk a lot about that. Secretory IgA, the first line of defense for the immune system. That can tell me if the immune system is being activated, and then that can lead us to look for other clues. And then if you look on this slide, they put this yeast on a petri dish, or this bad bug on a petri dish, and they look to see which one is the most, or they use all of these natural antifungals or natural prescription medications, and they see which one is the most sensitive. And you see across the page there's a couple that are very sensitive, and that's how us as clinicians treat. I'm telling you this too because when we do this, I see, I'm like so excited because I see so many kids get better. The gut thing is huge. Great Plains Lab organic acid test. I love this test. I love this test because number 7 is a metabolite of yeast. So that, I mean, you could look in different tests and you might not find yeast, but you look in on this test in number 7, it shows a metabolite of the yeast. The other thing is number 16, Clostridial marker. If you have Clostridia overgrowth, it can cause aggression, it can cause hyperactivity, you won't sleep, kids are angry. Huge, 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 huge. I see so much improvement once children are treated for this. Oxalates, again, much improvement when I see children that go on a low oxalate diet. Oxalates form in the presence of yeast. So if we can eradicate yeast, then we can hopefully eradicate oxalates. But what do oxalates do? Well, kids are touching their private parts, they're voiding on the floor, they're irritable, and so another thing that can help kids improve. Down the page, mitochondria, Dr. Rosignol is going to talk about that today. Neurotransmitters, chemical messengers that talk from one neuron to another neuron, so essentially one brain cell to another brain cell can be affected. But I don't believe that they're just affected on their own. I think they're affected from something like a gut bug, something like nutritional deficiency. If you see in the number 42 through 49 section, ketone and fatty acid oxidation, how well you can digest fat, mitochondrial function, and when you treat those, children do well. Neurotransmitters, like I said, are chemical messengers that talk from one nerve cell to another nerve cell, or one neuron to another neuron. It's really important to look at these neurotransmitters because often when you go to a psychiatrist, they'll just say, okay, you're ragey, oh, I think you're low in dopamine, let me put you on Risperidol. Well, let's think about what we can do that's a little bit more natural, or that will is a reason why the dopamine is high. Well, maybe the dopamine is high from Clostridia. So it's important to not just look at just one thing, because I see that often where we just focus on one thing. Neurotransmitters, but we're not looking at gut. So I'll leave you to look at this later, but this is really interesting. One thing, like acetylcholine, we would use, and I think Dr. Rosignol is going to talk about this today, is that acetylcholine I don't know. Cut this out. Glutamate can help with Namenda, which is medication, can help lower glutamate. So there's certain things, norepinephrine, propranolol can lower norepinephrine. So there's certain things that aren't true psychiatric medications that really do help our children, and they do a lot better. Explanation point times 1,000. Seizures. 30% of kids on the spectrum have seizures. You look at my son who's looking up away and kind of in an absent kind of way. Kids have seizures and you don't even know it. They can 5-second seizures where they're just looking away and you don't even know it, or they're having seizures in the middle of the night and you don't even know it. What does that do? Well, it affects the language and their ability to develop and grow physically and academically, cognitively. When you treat kids that are having absent seizures, like in my own son, you see my own son here who is having an EEG. This is my youngest child. He did a lot better. He started talking. Next thing, I mean, this is a hot topic. We all know that there's pollutants in the world, and that water can be affected. Here, this shows your how well that somebody's detoxing or what they're being exposed to. And so you can see that there's a lot of markers that show antimony is high when you're wearing pajamas. Arsenic can be high from non-organic chicken and non-organic rice. So this is a good identifier to see what your child is being exposed to and when you're eradicated. I had a parent that told me that they turned off their Wi-Fi in their house, turned off all the breakers when they were sleeping, got flip phones, did a water test and saw that their water was extremely polluted, and their child didn't show any more symptoms of autism. Mold. I see this a lot. People have mold in their house and they don't know it. They're often congested all the time, no matter what happens, and it's secondary to mold. So that's if your home is wet or if you smell like a moldy odor, I would recommend testing. Any kind of pesticides, chemicals. I mean, common sense. These are things that can affect children's growth and development. Porphyrin's test can can help me make a hypothesis a hypothesis about how much is in your soft tissues and bones, and a child's soft tissues and bones. And this one looks high. And in this case, I would suspect that the child had a chronic accumulation of metals. And I can tell you that when we address this, kids do get better. Other general labs that are important to think about, well, cholesterol. Cholesterol, if your child's cholesterol is low, it can affect their cognition. It can make them aggressive. Thyroid, if it's low, can affect cognition, and among a number of other things. Ferritin can affect cognition. Allergies, well, can make you congested, can upregulate or downregulate the immune system. ASO anti-DNase measures if you've been exposed to strep within the last 4 to 6 weeks. So it can be a clue sometimes if there's a strep presence involved. Lead and mercury in the bloodstream. I don't typically see this in the blood unless there's an acute exposure, but I have had acute exposures in my children and some of the children that I treat, children that are eating fish every day, a couple children that their homes were being remodeled and the walls were filled with or painted with lead paint. And then nutrients such as zinc and selenium, when you supplement with those, your kids do a lot better. In my own case, my children did a lot better. Immune system. When my middle child was sick all the time. He had a constant runny nose, 20 rounds of antibiotics before 2 years of age. He had two tubes placed twice, tonsillectomy, until he was diagnosed with immune deficiency. And then this is him getting IVIG in his stomach. But you can also get it via IV. I already talked to you about IgE, environmental, and food allergies. Autoimmunity to the folate receptor. Dr. Rossignol is going to talk about this today, but autoimmunity means where your own body sees your own body as foreign and attacks it. So if your body sees the folate receptor as foreign, then the folate is not going to get into the brain. And if folate's not going to get into the brain, it can affect methylation. It can affect the child's ability to detox, their immune system, among many other things. This is IgE environmental. I'm going to skip over that because we talked about that. Here's my youngest child when he had to have an operation on his ulcer. Mitochondria is the organelle in the cell which helps generate energy and metabolism. Dr. Rossignol is going to talk about this today. And when kids get what's called a mitococktail, they do better. Genetics, when we have a better understanding of genetics now, and certain genetic markers are very helpful with helping us to conclude what we should supplement with, and kids do a lot better. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, kids do a lot better with that. I've seen a lot of kids do well where it improves or cures their leaky gut. Other things that I didn't mention today are pandas, infection, or infection as a whole. So that's something that I believe Dr. Milky is going to talk about today, but I just want to let you know that when kids are treated for infections, if they have them, they do markedly better. I've seen a lot of kids in Dr. Milky's practice recover from autism because they had Lyme disease, or when she treated their Lyme disease. Mistakes along the way, trying everything all at once. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of things in this conference today, and you're going to want to go home and try all these things. I've been there, done that, and it's not a good approach. So because then you don't know the variable, and like I said, every child's very different, and it can be not a good thing for you, even though it was a good thing for somebody else. So I think for another child. So it's important for you to work underneath or work with a medical professional. Forums. So I personally don't love forums. Some people love them because you need to take everything with a grain of salt, because people get on there, and like I said, every child's very different, and you're talking and you're thinking, oh, okay, well, that's what my child should have, and it's like, no, that's not really what your child should have. So some people it's very helpful, but I do want you to take it with a grain of salt. And the other thing is, and I talked about this throughout the way, is not thinking about the fact that each child is unique, and what works for one child does not work for another. There is hope, and I don't ever want you to give up. And keep on fighting and going, and recovery is possible. I have my middle child recovered from autism. You would never even know he had autism. He's bright. He has friends. He had a girlfriend. He bought me this necklace on Amazon, which I would have never thought he could do. He's in neurotypical school. He's in sports. So it can happen. Kids can improve. Kids can recover. And lastly, I just want to let you know that if there's kids, if your kid is like my little guy and my youngest guy that hasn't gotten there completely, I'm not going to stop trying, and I don't want you to stop trying. So I want to give you realistic expectations that it is a challenge to recover some kids, but I don't want you to give up on that, because kids can improve, and we're never going to stop trying so that they can get where we want them to be. Thank you.